So what I did on Star Wars is I took a lot of old documentary films of air battles from World War II, and I cut them into the sequences of this is going to be the trench run, this is going to be the attack on the
Before you shot
Death Star.
anything.
Before I shot anything, before I even finished the script. When I started film school, I was a dyed-in-the-wool cinematic purist, and I got into huge fights in the middle of classes with the screenwriting professor saying, you know, character is bullshit, you know, 'cause that's not for cinema. Cinema is the art of the moving image. So when it got to that part of it, I knew that I couldn't write what I wanted. And I knew still drawings couldn't tell me what I wanted because I had to do it in terms of motion. The one thing I grabbed onto was that as opposed to Stanley Kubrick, who has got, you know, 1 2-minute shots in his film, where the thing just sits there and the ship sort of slowly cruises. But you can see every detail on that, and it's perfect. So I said, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do shots that are only about, you know, 12 frames, 32 frames at the most, and it'll move by so fast that you won't see the matte lines. And you won't see how it's put together. It'll just be a razzle-dazzle of visual fantasy.
Chito Fahadang's here to talk about cinematography and animation, and how that relates to what George Lucas was just talking about. Special thanks to the brilliant people that shared their time and thoughts with me on this script. Fernão Morato, Chris Brejon, and Zeno Pelgrims. This episode came to me when I watched Nerd Writer's The Real Fake Cameras of Toy Story 4 as I researched for my split diopter video. Toy Story 4 has a series of split diopter shots. But why make such choices like replicating a split diopter in animation, which doesn't even use a real camera? We're seeing a lot of stronger lens and cinematography choices in animation since WALL-E kicked off the trend in 2008, when director Andrew Stanton asked the heads of camera and lighting, Jeremy Lasky and Danielle Feinberg, to deliver a more live-action look. The team went as far as hiring Roger Deakins as a visual consultant for the process of making the film.
Andrew came into the movie wanting a very photographed look. He had been always looking at live-action films as his inspiration, which most of us do as well, and he wanted the audience to understand WALL-E as a real thing.
At the same time, he wanted to make it feel like it was filmed.
There's a sense of believability, of dimensionality. Not photorealism, but dimensionality that I really wanted to get on this picture.
The Lego movie has strong anamorphic vibes. Sing has bokeh to match the size of the characters. And we finally started seeing cinematographer credits at the end of the films. Live-action cinematography and animation cinematography are in universes so far apart, we have to go through several departments and definitions to connect them. So let's get started. Fernão Morato is a close friend and a layout artist in animated films. We'll get to what a layout artist does in a bit. The studio he's working at is determined to teach the core values of cinematography and lighting to its layout team, and he was hyped about it. Why is it such a big deal to teach cinematography to layout artists? And what are layout artists? When making a CG animated film, it all starts with a blank canvas. When you load up Maya for the first time, it's an empty grid. And just like you wouldn't hire a DP to be a sound mixer in a live-action film, you shouldn't hire an animator to be a set designer in CG animation. Every artist in CG animation can say,
I can tell you I don't have money, but what I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
Animator is an umbrella term for artists that work in animation, just like filmmaker is an umbrella term for anyone who makes movies. Just like live-action films, animated films also require wildly different skill sets between modelers, animators, lighters, compositors, layout artists, and plenty more roles. Layout artists are the ones who translate the storyboards into 3D. They do it by placing the characters in the set with the props, framing all of that as faithfully to the storyboards as possible. They are responsible for making sure all framing is consistent and the compositions are spotless, that there are no jump cuts, that shots hook up well, and the camera moves perfectly. It is about finding the message within each shot and stating it through great framing, rough lighting, and blocky action. Layout is one of the most collaborative departments in a CG production. Multiple artists can work on any given sequence, and they're constantly sharing what they built among the team. They're sort of jacks of all trades with a little understanding of many different areas of animation, but excelling at staging and composing. Because of the all-encompassing nature of layout, many decisions are made in this stage of the production. Layout is when the story starts to take shape in 3D, and that's why it needs to be rough. Drafted enough so the director can ditch shots without wasting someone's hard work, but with enough detail to tell the story, and especially to make action scenes work. In a traditional block, light, shoot approach for a live-action film, think of layout as blocking. You're working out the movement in the scene for both the camera and characters. But lighting has not even started, and the cast still has to go through wardrobe and makeup before you can give them notes on performance. So it's rough, but it creates a base for everyone to start doing their job. The process of layout showcases a big advantage of animation. You can easily change a lot of things. From Morato's experience, the layout process relies on a tight connection between layout artists, editors, and director, where they all blend in a hive mind of constant cutting and adjusting back and forth in Maya and Avid until everyone is happy with the direction that the sequence is taking. A lot of Morato's job has to do with making action sequences work, and that's often called previs. Hold on a second, wasn't he a layout artist? Where is this previs thing coming from? Layout has a lot to do with previs, which is short for pre-visualization. In some studios, they're the same thing. In others, they're kept separate. Previs has been around since 1999 and is still a taboo for directors in live-action films, regardless of how much planning, CGI, and VFX their film has. Marvel and Star Wars are key players in this arena, making great use of previs to save time and money during production. Remember what Lucas was saying at the beginning of this video? That's the idea of previs. When making a live-action project with CGI or a fully animated film, you don't just start filming or just start animating. You need a plan. Previs are rough animations that give the director an idea of how the finished film will play out. Think of it as a 3D animated storyboard. It's a resource used to figure out framing, movement, pacing, and timing for challenging sequences that'll cost millions of dollars to execute. Black Panther is a great example of previs, as Ryan Coogler was able to see all of the film's most expensive sequences much before the actual filming. The previs stage guided the team to acquire all the data and assets for the sequences to be built digitally afterwards. The key element in previs? It's fast to create and faster to modify. Previs sequences used to feature oversimplified characters, no lighting, hardly any textures, and very rough environments. The level of detail depends on the importance of those sequences or elements being explored. Previs are a guide or reference for the artists that'll work on those sequences. Still, many cinematographers feel previs limits their creativity by telling them exactly where to put the camera and taking away all of their creative input on set.
There's something about VFX supervisors, when you're talking to them about something, they immediately put me, even if I know it, and I've done it so many times, a particular thing, they'll say, "Are you doing it like that?" And immediately I go, "Oh, so I made a mistake, I'm not doing it right," or whatever, and I'm immediately put on the back foot.
Roberto Schaefer, cinematographer for Quantum of Solace and Stranger Than Fiction, believes the concern is valid. The bad side of previs is that people tend to see it as the written word, the Bible. It's important to treat it as a basic guide. If your approach abides by the previs too strictly, it can limit your thinking. To make matters worse, In many cases, the cinematographer is not consulted when a studio is making previous sequences for the movie. Said cinematographer is responsible for the look. Steven Yamamoto, who worked on previs for films like Justice League and World War Z, tries very hard to push against this injustice. The first chance I get, I want to ask him, the cinematographer, what aspect ratio he wants to use, what lenses he likes, and what kind of equipment he plans to use. If he's gonna have a 20-foot crane, I don't want to put in a 30-foot crane move. I also try to research the cinematographer's style, not just the director's, to try and get a handle on how he frames things. Back in film school, we had to present storyboards during production meetings. Blake was directing a film about a bigoted briefcase. Yep, you heard that right. And he had to whip storyboards together the night before presenting them in class. So he went into Gary's Mod, which is a sandbox video game, and hurriedly positioned cameras, characters, 2D cutouts, and environment references to make his storyboard. Basically, a type of previs. Because of the pace of production, Blake didn't have time to go back into it and think some more about his boards. His mindset was, I got this, I just got to go on set, repeat it, and it'll work. Yet, the film turned out flat and challenging to cut together. If he'd had time to experiment with previs and layout more and didn't feel locked to the boards he presented, he might have found out about his flat shots earlier and improved the pacing of the whole piece before the shoot, saving everyone, especially himself, stress and grief. What comes after layout can actually change a bunch from place to place. Each animation studio has its own detailed plan and process of taking a project from script to screen. Looking at Pixar's Renderman presentation at SIGGRAPH 2019, notice the Eye of Providence symbol everywhere, and the rinse and repeat signs over a bunch of departments. There's a lot of back and forth while working on an animated film, which is a big advantage over live action projects. If we are to simplify the order of these steps, layout frames the shots. Then it goes to animation, which takes care of performance and acting. And last, we have lighting and compositing, when the final looks of the film are cooked up. If we are comparing to live action, this order of operations is wildly different from the traditional block, light, shoot that's taught in film school. It's more like block, shoot, light, due to the adjustable nature of animation. Layout, animation, lighting, and compositing are highly technical departments. To ensure the artist's work is carrying the story forward, supervisors make the connection between the technical aspects of a shot and the narrative moment it fits into. When we talk about the cinematography of an animated film, a great in-depth resource is Chris Brejon's CG Cinematography blog. Brejon has a gripe with the fact that cinematography and narrative are little discussed when artists are working on animated films. From his blog, in most studios, the lighting crew barely evokes the story when starting a sequence. Generally, our main concern is to have a readable and pleasant image with nice colors and shaping on the characters. Traditionally speaking, a cinematographer is responsible for the look of a movie. In live-action films, we do that through lights, lens choices, and moving the camera around.
When you start an animated film, it really does start with the production designer in terms of where the look's going to go.
And we realized we needed to understand the camera better, the live action world of the camera. If we want to get these subtle things, and they've slowly started to sort of pile up as a list.
We started talking about a lot of existing sci-fi type genre films in the past.
And we realized that a lot of them use these anamorphic lenses.
One of the distinguishing features of an anamorphic film is that objects out of focus in the background tend to stretch vertically.
They become big ovals, and they'll turn into this cool sort of graphic, semi-transparent collage that really just helps make a mood and a sense of privacy. And
he's going into anamorphic shock. He's having an attack.
The last bit was about WALL-E, but I'll talk about the Lego movie, which has a cranked up anamorphic look. Barry Peterson is the traditional cinematographer for the live action sequences. but Pablo Pleisted is credited as the film's cinematographer. Delving into it, Pleisted is the layout supervisor, so he controls the camera, while Craig Welsh is the lighting supervisor. Pleisted and Welsh are responsible for the look of the animated parts of the Lego movie. They also have tons of experience with live-action cinematography, which is a rare trait. Early in the making of the film, Pleisted and Welsh were tasked with making it photorealistic. For any animated feature, photorealism is a tough call. In Welsh's blog, Expanded Cinematography, he elaborates on a few of the challenges they had early on. Scale. How miniature should the world feel? Can we retain a sense of the epic while evoking the tiny? Emotion. How can we enhance the drama of the film, given that our characters have cylindrical heads that are simpler in their response to light than the human heads, and lack the emotional focal point of the human face, the eyes? Light in a Lego world. How can we make people believe that this Lego world was actually constructed from real plastic bricks and photographed? Photographic considerations, depth of field, lens breathing, chromatic aberration, anamorphic distortion. In facing those challenges, Welsh brought a ton of influence from the budget-friendly universe of photographing miniatures and toys into the multi-million-dollar budget of the Lego movie. Lego had been making films for quite a while now, and they did not look like Lego. In fact, they did not look good at all.
The idea was to take a very homemade brick film and try and make that as cinematic as possible with lighting and camera angles and the type of things that you would do on a big budget live action movie.
Brick films are fan-made shorts using Lego bricks and minifigs. They go back decades and have their own cult following. They're usually done in stop motion, and some can look super darn good. When the first trailer for the Lego movie came out, a lot of viewers were left wondering if the movie was actually CG or stop motion.
It is, I would say, 99% CG animation, but it respects the rules of stop motion animation. It's designed to emulate that style.
That is production designer Grant Freckleton, who, along with Welsh, was looking into Avenant's miniature photography using Lego as a reference for mood and setting. Avenant, in turn, was following Douglas Turnbull as a reference, pumping a ton of smoke into everything. Turnbull is behind the looks of Blade Runner, Close Encounters, and other smoky gems. And we can definitely see this smoky influence in the Lego movie. So we have an animated movie, the Lego movie, which aims to look photorealistic, learning from miniature photography that uses a special effects approach to creating a strong visual style. In brick films, live action and homemade. For animation style, forget content is king, forget content. Reference is the real king. Moving from the lighting to the camera work, FX Guide TV has a great interview with Pleisted, the man with the movie camera, for the Lego movie.
So in terms of those lenses, is there a natural correlation to real lenses, or did you just sort of make up your own versions?
No, we have proxies, I guess, for real world lenses.
So depth of field would be accurate to those real world lenses, or just your own?
Yeah, we had accurate depth of field. We had the luxury of being able to turn it on and off at the hit of a button, so it was really easy for us to compose the shots as we wanted to, and then worry about the depth of field almost as a second step.
That means they took data from real-world lenses and built those into their system, being able to recreate their look inside the computer, as Pleisted said, turning them on and off with the click of a button.
How do you approach virtual cinematography?
There's a subconscious language of cinema that people are used to, and I think 3D cinematography can sometimes be a little bit too, as you're talking about, all on one axis and all pivoting from the same place. And it's quite powerful when you can get away from that. We had some virtual Steadicam rigs. We used those to great effect, I think, to really make you feel like there was a camera operator there. And it's actually one of the biggest things to give scale as well, because what 3D cameras like to do is to interpolate very smoothly and perfectly. And that takes all the weight out. There's one scene in particular which is a scene where Emmett's being interrogated, and it comes kind of towards the start of the film, but at that point in the movie we've only had quite formal, very locked off cameras. It's the first moment where Emmett kind of realises something bad is happening to him, so we really tried to push that in terms of having handheld cameras and giving the audience a sense of uneasiness, a kind of subconscious uneasiness. That's one of the sequences we use a lot of the virtual Steadicam rigs. So it gives you a much more nervous feeling. And hopefully the effect that we would get is that the audience will subconsciously feel that. So they'll, rather than having a very locked off camera where everything feels safe and ordered, the camera is moving a lot and like correcting and adjusting.
And yet I didn't really see you going heavily into hunt and seek on focus or framing. So there must be a line there of sort of becoming aware of that and not.
Yeah, and these are all the things that we kind of developed as the style of the film as we went. I mean, we started off trying to overshoot with the focus a little bit, and it just, because the depth of field is so extreme, you're just so aware of it that we pretty quickly shut that down, and focus was perfect, but we'd overshoot with the motion of the camera and trying to give the camera weight. That was one of the trickiest things on this film.
And is it literally pivoted like a Steadicam with an access point way lower than the camera?
Yeah, it was. It was, so you'd be moving lower, pivoting from kind of essentially a hip level on a minifig. So it was like a little minifig Steadicam operator. It was pretty cute, actually.
Having a minifig camera operator is just next level awesome. I imagine this would be the camera. Plysted says depth of field was set in the layout stage, but in lighting and compositing with Welsh is where those choices translated into the lens look that we have in the final film. Alex Fry, the compositing supervisor, developed their own plugin, a gizmo to be accurate, called Lego Lens. Nope, not the same Lego Lens as Mathieu Stern. The Lego Lens by Fry gave compositors great control over depth of field, aperture, chromatic aberration, anamorphic field of view, lens breathing, lens flare, and bokeh in the finishing stages of the film. So if anyone thought you couldn't give character to a digital lens, there you have it. Later on in Lego Movie Batman, due to different lighting conditions, Fry strikes again and creates the Gotham lens, a procedural lens flare generator to tackle the anamorphic flares. They did a massive overhaul of the original Lego lens here, bringing in distortion, fixing how depth of field working in the original movie, improved bokeh by building a direct connection to aperture value and shape, as well as added more optical imperfections and controls. Hell, we even have a split diopter shot there. Welsh explains this flare behavior wasn't standard for the first Lego movie. It used traditional compositing techniques to manually add anamorphic flares to the footage. But in Lego Batman, they were built into the lens's code. The Lego Movie franchise and Pixar are the bleeding edge of pushing the technical envelope and pursuing special looks. For both Lego Movie and Toy Story 4, you have mentions of proxy lenses, or that the digital lenses were modeled after real-world optics. I was flabbergasted trying to figure out how that works until I came across Zeno Pelgrims. Pelgrims is a technical shader and a big fan of vintage lenses. You see where this is going, right? He's got a project called Lentil, which is a camera shader for CG renders. Let's bring this back to English. According to Zeno, modern-day technology is doing pretty great with ray tracing. But most ray tracers will neglect everything between the scene and the camera sensor. I'm talking about the lens, the optics. And we're used to seeing those imperfections in live action. So adding optical imperfections makes images more realistic to the viewers since there are no perfect lenses. And a perfect image stands out as too clean, too digital. So camera shaders are responsible for bringing a character to digital lens renders. Zeno explained me that there are a few different approaches for camera shaders. The most basic one is a pinhole, where everything is in focus. You get it all sharp, throw in a depth map, and create shallow depth of field during compositing. This is still a pretty common take. A shot rendered this way will go through heavier compositing to add lens character and will require much more labor. it still won't be as accurate and good looking as some of the more recent options. Past the pinhole, you have the thin lens from a 1984 white paper. And that's the most common approach for animated films for a few reasons we'll see in a minute. In 1995 came naive ray tracing, which takes information from actual lens patterns such as element's curvature, thickness, index of refraction, Abe number, and distance between elements to calculate a ray of light going through a physically accurate optical system. This method takes a ton of time to trace all these light rays. So, super cool concept, not so great execution. Fast forward more than 20 years, and in 2016 we got to polynomial optics, which compounds the expensive naive ray tracing into a series of expressions and make the process much faster, but just as accurate. That's what Pelgrim's project, Lentil, is using, and you get to choose from all the lens options Zeno managed to implement. Most studios choose the thin lens shader though, which is not as fun as the state-of-the-art approach. This is a convenience choice, as the rendered image will be an absolute match to what the artists see in the viewport while they work, where they can move the cameras, lights, and assets in real time. With the thin lens method, what you see is what you get. When using the physically accurate light computations for the render, you can't see the lens behavior in real time, and there is a discrepancy between what layout sees in the viewport and what the shots look like once rendered. So layout becomes a little less accurate. In compositing, the more accurate lens model used on the render, the less artists need to recreate a lens's character by hand. Compositing might add some more chromatic aberration, some lens bloom, or crank up imperfections the model couldn't simulate, like lens dirt, scratches, and flares. But no need to redefine depth of field, like the pinhole method. Unfortunately, only a few high-end studios like Pixar or Animal Logic can afford to use the state-of-the-art approaches, and this is something Pelgrims is working to change with camera shaders you can use with Lentil. Chris Brejon's article on the Playmobil movie tells about amazing developments happening in the industry right now. The main victory is being able to achieve more collaborative workflows in a way that many artists can be working on the same scene or sequence at the same time and riffing off each other. Besides that, getting a more finished look straight out of the box using modern camera shaders saves a lot of time and budget. According to Morato, with the advent of real-time rendering and global illumination, shots are coming out of layout looking better than ever. Some studios are making a pre-light pass on all the sequences just so the director can get the tone of each shot set already at this early stage. Cinematography and animation has been in its infancy for far too long. This doesn't mean individual artists weren't putting their energy into it. It just means that there was no structural support in the industry to develop CG animated cinematography to its full potential. In the end, there's not one cinematographer for a CG production. You get at least two. One supervisor for layout, determining camera framing and movement, and another supervisor in lighting for, well, lights. But all decisions are being made by dozens of creative minds in a back and forth dynamic process that would be impossible to mimic on a live action set. Think of it as filming all the setups in a sequence simultaneously. Special thanks to the people that helped me research this episode. Those folks tell amazing stories and want the industry to change for the better. They push for better looking films and more sophisticated imagery. Thank you so much and keep at it. If you got any questions about what we just talked about, and I anticipate you do, spill them out in the comments below. If you're into this different format of video, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button, as I'll be using that to gauge your interest in denser subjects than simply anamorphic filmmaking. Thank you so much for making it to the end. I am Chit Fahadungs, and I'm out of here.
Hey, you! That's right. Come here. A little closer. I said closer. Now that we've had some time to get acquainted, not so scary now, are we? Webbs, hit it.